Today, I want to talk to you about owning who you are. I am Anatoly Anatolisova, and this is Patriots Must Rise. First of all, we have a major issue in America with division in our country, to the point that the red states want to secede from the Union. This has been tried before, unsuccessfully, and we call it the Civil War. It wasn't about slavery, guys. Very little of a civil war was about slavery. It was about who actually won the presidency and states' rights. But before I get into that, I want to address something that is so much more important, and that is the victim mentality of the left-wing African American, or the so-called marginalized citizens of America. We'll start with the African American because it is the most prominent issue on the table today. Okay. Every nation, every culture in the world, in the history of the world, has been enslaved at one point. This is the first time in the world's history that the generations down the road from the actual slaves, the people have refused to let go of their chains and still become victims and slaves to their victimhood. Okay, I'm not promoting racism. I'm promoting facts. Okay, if you look at the Slavic people, okay, first of all, the word Slavic loosely means servant. This is where the word slave came from. So, knowing that, you should figure out that you're not the only victims of slavery out there. It is very important that you understand that the Irish, the Uyghurs in China, the Jews, hell, Native Americans enslaved other tribes. It's just part of human history. But the reason I bring it up is because we have a class of people in America that the Democrat Party are using as victims to consistently get elected, and they don't realize that they're being used. Okay? Think about it. Every African American who has ever stepped out of the box and actually accepted who they are, put the past behind them and pushed forward as their own person and stopped using the excuse, I can't do something because I'm black, or you hate me because I'm black, has succeeded beyond any method of recording. Booker T. Washington, okay, saved countless lives during the Civil War as a doctor. This is not something that is to be argued. I mean, you just look in any history book and yeah, it happened. We don't hide the fact that a black man was successful. Well, we might now because the libtards want to run the schools, and apparently they they have an agenda. But the reality is, you don't find anybody in, I believe, the history of the world that hasn't let go of their past, that hasn't succeeded. And by the way, there were several African American freed slaves that eventually bought slaves. We need to put this victim mentality to the wayside, because it's only there to cause division. The true enemy is the government that is enslaving all of us. All right. Ben Shapiro says that eventually, if the government keeps going in the direction that it's going, the red states will have to secede from the Union. What that actually means is two possibilities: a very violent civil war that Ben Shapiro doesn't think that we would win. But I'm going to talk later about why I actually believe that we could. And then we have the fact that our own government is trying to weasel their way into a digital currency that they are calling the central bank digital currency, that is due to be released sometime next year, where we will not have a right to actually control our investments. We would not actually be able to buy something without permission from the government. I don't know about you, but that is scary. And it should be scary, because that also means that if they have absolute control over whether or not, or how much your account is valuing, they can take money out of your account without even having permission. All we have to do is reverse the interest rates. Okay? So we need to put this racism bullcrap aside and actually realize that Washington, D.C. is the enemy. They're the ones that are trying to enslave everybody. It's not about racism anymore. It's about patriotism. And yes, there is a reason that the left decided that the word patriot is racist. It basically boils down to, hey, look, we don't like the fact that people are still patriotic. We don't like the fact that people still like the idea of independent freedom. So we're going to try to cause division among you. This isn't about politics anymore. It's about survival. Whether or not you can buy enough bread with your salary to keep food on your table during the month. Okay? You elect the wrong person, obviously that doesn't happen. So we need to put our differences aside and actually start to think about what.
Abraham. I'm a political exile from Chicago, Illinois. Right now I'm in Kansas City. My questions for the hosts are, what are your thoughts about secession? Should the red states secede from the Union?
Okay, Ben, I'm going to let you take that one.
So, the The problem is that there is a giant federal government with 2 million people working for it, including a massive army with nuclear weapons. And so on a practical level, one of the reasons I moved to a red state was to personally secede from California, right? Was to move to a place where I was going to be surrounded by people who shared my values and who wanted to educate their kids the same way I wanted to educate my kids. And this is why I'm a big believer in federalism. I do think that the notion that this is going to go quite as smoothly as everybody seems to think it's going to go, that the federal government just says, okay, well, half the country can take off, that there's not a great history of that. What I think instead is that what's going to happen is a fight to destroy the scope of the federal government.
Yeah.
Because either we are going to share a country or we're not. And this really will be the question. The question is not going to be, is there a civil war in our future if the government continues to grow this way? Because if the government continues to grow this way, secession will happen. I mean, that just is the reality. If the government continues to grow to the point where it controls all aspects of life, down to whether you can own a gun, how you can educate your kids, when the states provide no barrier to how you choose to live your life, people will resist that. That's just the reality of how human beings live. The only way to combat that is going to be to tremendously limit and I think in large ways destroy the scope and ability of the federal government to control our lives and to relegate a lot of that power back to the states. And so
J.P. Sears is a conservative comic that does these rather interesting skits to illustrate the point that he's trying to make. I thought this skit about the central bank digital currency should hit home rather well if you listen to what the skit is saying. So, here you go.
Pics of Team LGBTQIA+? Shockingly not. It's central bank digital currency. It's coming whether you like it or not. Personally, I like it. That definitely doesn't sound like a part of a globalist takeover. What are central bank digital currencies? Well, you know how people love cryptocurrencies because they're decentralized and they give people complete control of their money? Yeah. Well, CBDCs are like cryptocurrency, but instead of being decentralized, they're as centralized as you can possibly get. Oh, so it's like cryptocurrency in the sense that it's the complete opposite of it. Yes. And is your digital currency controlled by blockchain technology so nobody can mess with it? No, it'll be controlled by the Federal Reserve so the government can always mess with it. That sounds amazing. Way better than crypto where everything is decentralized and you're the steward of your own money. And I assume CBDCs will be backed by gold, making them a digital representation of something of actual value? No, CBDCs are backed by the US dollar, which is not backed by gold.
I have directed Secretary Connolly to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets.
So CBDCs are backed with nothing of value, which is also backed with nothing of value. Exactly. Do you know what a pyramid scheme is? Absolutely not, but I'm really excited to go along with digital currencies. I mean, you're really talking me into them. Oh, and get this. You know how cryptocurrencies can be really volatile where the value of them can go up and down? A lot of uncertainty? Yes. Well, digital currencies are better than that because the government will control them and they're always doing things to devalue the US dollar, which means your digital currencies will do nothing but go down, which gives you certainty. So no more stress about the volatility of cryptocurrencies. Now, with this centralization of money that you speak of, does this mean that the government can monitor all your financial transactions? No, it doesn't mean the government can monitor your financial transactions. It means the government will monitor your financial transactions. Well, I guess that's a good thing, and if that's just all they do. Well, it sounds like they'll be doing more than that. Yep. Can't wait to hear what else. Yeah, with CBDCs in place, it also means they'll be able to freeze your account or adjust your balance at any time, preventing you from using your own money and even taking your money from you? Yeah. I see how that could have a lot of upside. Yeah, just imagine how it could reduce domestic terrorism by punishing parents who speak up at school board meetings. You don't think your son should be doing a reassignment sculpting surgery during art class? Well, your funds are frozen, terrorist. And we're taking a little something for our effort. It could also help prevent people from trying to destroy our democracy by exercising the right to free speech. Implementing CBDCs will no doubt be what saves our democracy. This system could also get our elections back on track by punishing people who vote for the wrong candidate. That would be helpful. And I assume the World Economic Forum is probably against CBDCs. No, they're for them. Oh my gosh, I am surprised by that. Yeah, the WEF says that CBDCs will be the safest digital asset available for the general public. They'll do anything to make us safer. They also say that CBDCs are a risk-free form of money that'll be guaranteed by the state. Yeah, well, we've already covered that there's no risks with CBDCs. They eliminate the people that are the risks. And the WEF says that CBDCs will improve financial inclusion.
Welcome to
anything done in the name of inclusion always works out super well. 100% of the time. So if we can get a CBDC in place, it's definitely coming. Then instead of me having to control my own money, the government will control it for me, so I won't have to. Yes! However, for you to call it your money is a bit arrogant. Yeah. Remember how the World Economic Forum says you'll own nothing and be happy about it? Yeah. And people are like, that sounds crazy. How would I end up owning nothing? Well, CBDCs are how that happens. Great.
That was Obama's administration. It's kind of interesting, actually, that every recession has always been during a Democrat administration. But during the recession of Barack Obama's administration, gun owners, gun enthusiasts started using ammo, guns, magazines, especially magazines that the Democrats were trying to ban, as collateral, as currency. Because ultimately, when shit hits the fan, there's only two things that you're really going to want, and none of it has to do with toilet paper. That's how we know that the liberals will never actually win this war. But the so-called high-capacity magazines were going at a premium. As a matter of fact, I've got a clip here that talks about one guy actually paying off a mortgage with the magazines that he had bought. Granted, he bought like a pallet full of them, but it might be something to think about, because the war is obviously coming. It's coming very quickly, and we know that this election is not going to go well because they've already figured out how to cheat. So let's watch the edit.
Magazines, the currency of the future, the coming recession, stock market collapse, society is gone, dogs and cats living together, whatever. I have some magazines. Am I going to be able to use them to pay off my mortgage?
I mean, so before we went live, of course, I was relaying the story of a friend who did just that. Right before Sandy Hook, he bought a pallet of Magpul, and I don't know what that prices were. Probably $3-4 a pop, maybe $5 high end.
Especially buying in bulk,
right? And then, as we recall, AR-15 mags went to, $100+ each. Mm-hmm. So, as the story is relayed to me, sold it all, paid off his mortgage.
Mm-hmm. And I think magazines are going to be one of those things that will constantly be in flux. Every time we get a new, I almost said regime, we don't want to call it that, a new administration.
No, we want to call it that.
And people start talking about banning high-capacity magazines or banning firearms or making ammo harder to get or something like that. I'm not afraid to say, yes, I have a bunch of magazines still unwrapped. From the last time that prices started to go up, I was like, I'm going to buy them now before this happens. And not a pallet, but certainly enough for me, for my personal use, let's call it that. But we're looking at economic uncertainty. We're looking at legislative uncertainty. And people are buying things. There's panic buying in the firearms community all the time. And if there's something that you were going to buy, would it be magazines? Would it be AR-15 accessories or parts or lowers or something like that? What should we be looking at in the future? You know, if you could look into Tom's crystal ball, what are the things that are going to be on the block? What's going to be the things that people should get a hold of?
One of the key points of division that has always worked on me, and mostly because I realize why the left is doing it, is the lack of encouragement for Hispanic immigrants to learn English. In fact, it's almost discouraged. And the reason why Dinesh D'Souza in Stealing America, in The Big Lie, in his last one. Anyway, he's got like four books that he outlines this very well, where the Polish, the Irish, the Russians, the Italians, even the Puerto Ricans come into America in the 50s, 60s, 30s, 20s, and they get assimilated. They struggle at first because they're learning the language, but once they learn the language, they start opening businesses. They start running for office. They start becoming independent, and they never look back. They never lean toward the Democrat Party ever again, because they start realizing that they are everything that they wanted to leave from their country in the first place. With the Hispanics not learning English, they're not comparing notes. They're not actually becoming assimilated. They're just basically hired help for the farmer that doesn't necessarily care if they're even documented, or the and by the way, if they're not documented, the employer doesn't have to pay them, because there's no consequences. There's no proof that this guy even is even working, because he's working under the table. This is one of the reasons why the left really encourages the open borders thing. Okay? In 1926, my grandfather came to Ellis Island. It was one of the last boats that ever came into Ellis Island, and he noticed that even back then there was a encouragement to stay with your people. Granted, people would have done that by nature anyway, but that's where the barrios came from. That's where Chinatown, Little Italy, and stuff like that came from, because the Democrats realized that if these new immigrants came deeper into New York and started to actually talk to people that have been there for a while, even born in New York, they would start realizing that their policies aren't exactly everything that they're cracked up to be. But that actually started happening. People started getting comfortable with going outside of their boroughs because of the fact that their jobs were making them go outside their boroughs. They were delivering produce or linen to a company, and they start talking to people. And once they actually started comparing notes, especially after they started learning English, they never went back to the Democrat Party. This is a fundamental need for the Democrats. They cannot have new immigrants learn English because they do not want those new voters to leave the party, because nobody comes back to the Democrat Party. I just wanted to leave with that particular thought, because they have been manipulating the elections for over 200 years. We need to fight back in other ways. The elections aren't going to be the way to fight back, but we can starve them. We can find ways to avoid paying taxes if we can find employers to pay us in bullets or crypto instead of actual U.S. currency that is taxed. This episode, please consider what I was saying about putting your personal differences aside and realizing who the true enemy is, because we've been manipulated long enough. We really have. If you like this material, if you want to see more, it would be greatly appreciated if you donate. A link is in the description.